Emily Carter told herself she would only stay for a few minutes, just long enough to drop off the folder Sarah had forgotten at her parents' house, but the moment she stepped onto the familiar porch, a strange tightness settled in her chest, the kind that warned her something inside her had already crossed a quiet line. The house looked the same as it always had, white door, small porch light, neat garden, but Emily was not the same person who used to run up these steps years ago laughing with her best friend. She was older now, carrying heartbreak she never spoke about, carrying questions about where her life was going, and when the door opened and David Miller stood there, smiling softly, she felt that ache shift into something warmer and far more dangerous. He greeted her kindly, just as he always did, but his voice seemed steadier than the world felt to her, and for a brief second, Emily forgot to move, forgot why she was there, forgot who he was supposed to be to her. David noticed the pause, asked if she was okay, and she nodded quickly, stepping inside, telling herself she was imagining things, that this sudden awareness of him, his calm presence, his tired but gentle eyes, the quiet confidence in the way he carried himself, meant nothing. As they walked through the house toward the kitchen, Emily noticed details she had never noticed before, how he moved slowly but with purpose, how his voice softened when he spoke her name, how the house felt less empty when he was in it, and that realization scared her more than she wanted to admit. David poured coffee, offered her a seat, and they talked casually at first, about Sarah's work, about the weather, about small things that filled silence, but underneath every word, Emily felt a pull she could not explain, a sense that she was standing too close to something she should not want. She reminded herself that David was her best friend's father, that he had watched her grow up, that any strange feeling she had was wrong and temporary, but the more she tried to push it away, the louder it became, especially when David listened to her with real attention, not distracted, not rushed, as if her words mattered more than the time. When she mentioned her recent breakup, she expected polite sympathy, but instead David asked thoughtful questions, not digging, just offering space, and Emily surprised herself by answering honestly, by letting her guard down in a way she had not done in months. She spoke faster than she meant to, about loneliness, about how hard it was to start over, and David did not interrupt, did not offer empty advice, he simply listened, and in that quiet understanding, Emily felt seen in a way that made her heart ache. She realized then that the feeling she was trying to ignore had been growing slowly, unnoticed, built from moments of kindness, shared silence, and emotional safety, and now it was standing right in front of her, impossible to deny. David sensed the shift too, though he could not name it, only that the room felt different, heavier, as if something important was happening without permission. He cleared his throat, changed the subject, asked if she needed anything else before leaving, and Emily stood up quickly, relieved and disappointed at the same time. As she gathered her things, her eyes met his again, and the air between them felt charged, not with anything spoken or acted upon, but with everything they were both trying not to feel. Emily left the house with her heart racing, walking faster than necessary to her car, telling herself she was being foolish, that admiration could feel like attraction when life felt empty, that she needed distance, clarity, control. But as she drove away, her hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel, she knew something had already changed, that the simple visit she thought would take minutes had awakened a feeling she should never have allowed, and deep down, she feared this was only the beginning of a story she did not know how to stop. David Miller did not expect Emily's visit to linger in his mind, yet days passed and her presence stayed with him in quiet ways, slipping into his thoughts while he worked, cooked, or sat alone in the evenings, and this unsettled him because he had spent years teaching himself how to live without emotional surprises. After his wife's death, he had rebuilt his life around routine and responsibility, keeping his heart guarded, especially for Sarah's sake, but Emily's honesty during that short visit had cracked something open he thought was sealed. He told himself it was concern, nothing more, that she was young, hurting, and needed kindness, but he noticed how often he replayed her words, how her sadness had stirred his own memories of loss, and how natural it felt to talk to her without pretending to be stronger than he was. When Emily returned the following week, he was careful, polite, and steady, yet the air between them felt charged with awareness neither of them named. They spoke about work, about books, about life changes, and the conversation moved fast and deep, skipping shallow topics, creating a closeness that felt earned rather than forced. David caught himself smiling more than usual, caught himself waiting for her reactions, and that realization frightened him because he knew exactly why it was dangerous. He reminded himself she was Sarah's best friend, someone he had known since she was young, someone whose life should never be complicated by his emotions, yet when Emily laughed softly at something he said, warmth spread through him in a way that felt painfully alive. Emily noticed his restraint, the way he kept a careful distance, but she also noticed how his eyes softened when he looked at her, how his voice lowered when conversations turned personal, and that balance between closeness and control pulled her in further. One evening, when Sarah was away, they found themselves sitting across from each other at the kitchen table as rain tapped against the windows, the quiet pressing in around them, and Emily spoke about feeling lost, about not knowing if she was moving forward or just standing still, and David answered honestly, admitting that life did not always give clear signs, that sometimes people simply learned how to carry uncertainty. Their shared honesty created a moment that felt fragile and real, and both of them felt it, the unspoken understanding that something deeper was forming beneath simple conversation. David felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on his chest, knowing he could not allow himself to cross even the smallest line, knowing that feelings, once spoken, could not be taken back, and he made a choice to stay silent, to let caution guide him instead of desire. Emily sensed that choice, sensed the invisible wall he placed between them, and it hurt more than she expected because it confirmed what she already feared, that whatever this was could never become something real. She left that night unsettled, driving home with a mix of longing and shame, while David remained in the kitchen long after the door closed, staring at the empty chair, understanding that he was standing at the edge of something meaningful and forbidden. Neither of them had touched, neither had spoken a single inappropriate word, yet both felt changed, as if a door had opened briefly and revealed a life neither was allowed to step into, and as the days moved forward, they each carried the same silent question, wondering how long they could pretend that nothing had shifted when everything inside them said otherwise. Emily tried to fix the problem the only way she knew how, by creating distance, and at first it felt like the right choice because space made the feeling quieter, easier to ignore, but it did not erase it, and every missed call, every cancelled visit, left a hollow ache that followed her through busy days and restless nights. She told Sarah she was overwhelmed with work, told herself she needed time to think, and avoided the Miller house completely, believing that if she stopped showing up, the emotions would fade on their own. David noticed the change immediately, though he said nothing, because silence had become his way of protecting everyone involved, yet the absence weighed on him heavily, making the house feel emptier than it already was. He replayed conversations in his mind, searching for a moment where he might have crossed a line without realizing it, blaming himself for allowing emotional closeness to grow unchecked. When weeks passed without seeing Emily, he accepted it as necessary, even though it felt like losing something he had never been allowed to claim. Their next meeting came unexpectedly at a small family gathering where friends and relatives filled the room with noise and movement, and when Emily walked in, David felt the familiar tightening in his chest, stronger than before, because now he knew what it meant. They greeted each other politely, smiles careful, voices controlled, pretending the past weeks had not existed, but the tension between them was clear in every glance, every pause that lasted a second too long. Emily felt it too, the weight of unsaid words pressing against her ribs, and staying in the same room felt unbearable, so she stepped outside for air without thinking. Moments later, David followed, driven by concern and something deeper he refused to name. The evening air was cool and still, and for a moment neither of them spoke, standing side by side without touching, aware of how close they were and how far apart they needed to remain. Emily broke the silence first, apologizing for disappearing, her voice unsteady as she admitted she needed space to understand her own thoughts, and David told her he understood, even though understanding did not ease the hurt. She tried to explain that she never meant to complicate his life, never wanted to bring confusion into a place that already carried loss, and as she spoke, emotion slipped through her careful control, revealing how much she valued him, how safe she felt around him. David listened, his expression calm but his heart heavy, because he knew exactly what her words meant even if she never said them directly, and he knew he had to respond with honesty that did not invite hope. He told her quietly that she mattered, that was precisely why they had to be careful, because caring without boundaries could destroy more than it healed. The truth settled between them like a final answer, painful but clear, and Emily felt tears rise as she realized that love, even gentle and unspoken, sometimes demanded sacrifice. From inside the house, laughter spilled out, Sarah's voice bright and unaware, pulling them both back to reality and reminding them of everything at stake. Emily took a step back, choosing distance because it was the only way to protect what mattered most, and David stayed where he was, watching her walk away, knowing he could not follow. That night marked a quiet ending, not of feeling, but of possibility, and though neither of them spoke of it again, both carried the weight of that choice forward, learning that some connections were meant to change who you are, not stay in your life forever. Time moved forward with steady force, pulling Emily and David away from the moment that once held so much weight, and with distance came change, not sudden or easy, but slow and shaping, the kind that teaches acceptance rather than erasing. Memory. Emily took a job in another city, believing that new streets and unfamiliar faces would quiet her heart, and though the move was lonely at first, it gave her room to rebuild herself without the constant reminder of what could never be. She focused on work, made new routines, and learned how to stand on her own again, carrying the memory of David not as a regret, but as proof that she was still capable of deep feeling. From time to time, she thought of him during quiet moments, wondering if he was well, hoping he had found peace, and instead of pain, she felt gratitude for the way he had listened when she needed it most. David returned to his calm, structured life, pouring his energy into work and family, and while the house remained quiet, it no longer felt as heavy because he had learned something important about himself through Emily, that his heart was still alive and capable of connection despite loss. He respected the distance between them, never reaching out beyond a polite message during holidays or milestones, understanding that boundaries were not signs of weakness but of care. Years passed, and both lives filled with new chapters, small joys, and everyday challenges, and though they never spoke of the past, its lessons stayed with them, shaping the way they loved and protected others. One evening, Emily stood on her apartment balcony, watching city lights flicker below, reflecting on how life had surprised her, and she realized that what she felt for David had not been a mistake, but a moment of truth that helped her understand the kind of connection she deserved. Around the same time, David sat alone with a book Emily had once recommended, finding a note she had left inside long ago, thanking him for his kindness, and as he read it, a quiet smile crossed his face, filled with tenderness rather than sorrow. They had never crossed a line, never acted on feeling, and because of that, what they shared remained pure and unbroken by regret. Their story did not end with togetherness, but with respect, growth, and emotional honesty, proving that sometimes the strongest love is the one you choose not to claim, the one that stays gentle, remembered, and meaningful long after the moment has passed.